Good afternoon, everybody. We're joined by Tracy Shuchart. Tracy started her career at the Chicago Board of Trade as a futures broker, specializing in options and managed futures over the past 12 years. Soon after, she moved to the floor, where she managed an institutional trading desk, working with some of the top investment banks and hedge funds, as well as energy OTC markets via CME Clearport. Tracy's now an independent trader specializing in the energy market. Tracy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you to talk about the markets. So you have an interesting background. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in the industry.
So really, I was in the medical industry, and I sold medical devices in California, and I decided that I didn't like my job anymore and I wasn't happy, so I quit and I moved to Chicago. Never been there before, with the intent of getting a job in the industry. So that's how I started, and knocked on doors. And of course, my first foray into the industry was at a total boiler room, making 400 calls a day, trying to sell people options. So that's kind of how I started, and then just worked my way up. And, because I was at the Board of Trade, met a ton of other traders. And
so how did you think then, how did you just stumble upon the markets? Why didn't you think of a different industry?
So my father was a commodities broker too. So I guess it runs in the family.
I gotcha. So that's a bit more about that. And then, so what was it like being on the floor in, it's a typically male-dominated industry. What was it like being on the floor back then?
I mean, the floor is great. I learned so much. I mean, I was there in the 2000s. So obviously towards the end, but it was a great experience. I wish everybody could experience that. There's just a lot of energy there, and it's just a very unique experience. But being a girl on the floor, as long as you're kind of and I had been at the board anyway, and I had when I was a broker, I was the only girl at any firm that I ever worked at. So you kind of get used to it. You demand respect, and you get it.
Yeah, absolutely. So being on the floor, how did you develop a kind of a strategy or a feel for the market?
So, I mean, we had an institutional trade desk. So really, I was, we were more on the execution side of it. Rarely, usually, hedge funds or banks, they would just come to us with already the strategy that they wanted. And we just executed the orders for them.
Right.
That's kind of how that.
Well, that's.
I mean, we were just an order desk, basically.
Right. And so, how did you take that information from basically being on the floor and working with the order desk to kind of like get a feel for the markets to in a way to develop the way that you're trading now? I already was kind of trading, small accounts on the side, and I had always been interested in oil because it was my first winning trade. In the options when I was, a broker, and it kind of fit with my political science background. So, I had always had a special interest in the oil markets. Working on the floor is a little bit different because, we were working for our options, which is not really something that, I trade very often. So really it was just the experience of actually trading. And then, on the trade floor is really where I learned, the traders there really use a lot of TPO, which, I know a lot of people haven't heard of. So I think I kind of gained a little bit of experience, or what's the word I'm looking for? Advantage, because we would use that a lot. And I come across, I find that on Twitter and stuff, when I post those charts, a lot of people have never seen it or haven't heard of it. So that was something that was the first indicator that I was really taught, if you want to call it an indicator. Sure. And so from that, take us to the way you currently analyze the markets and kind of trade the markets.
So, I mean, currently, obviously, I trade the
just a couple markets. But I mean, as far as how I start my day, or
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, I mean, obviously, I come, how I start my day. I start at 4 in the morning. I read every piece of fundamental, every news item out there, basically. Not that that necessarily, uh, um, that doesn't really necessarily, fundamentals don't necessarily have much to do with my intraday trading, which is purely technically driven, but it does have a lot to do with sort of my macro view, my macro outlook on the market in general, and certainly would play a little bit bigger part in like my swing trades per se.
Right.
As far as interest,
Well, yep. Oh, so you can follow on that.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so you take a look at the macro view, you read a lot, and then, but you mentioned that you take a look intraday, you're trading really off
Right,
technicals. So what sort of
technically.
technicals?
So I mean, as far as I kind of have my own system that I've kind of developed over the years. So I mean, I use technical indicators. I use Fibonacci. I have special volume profile that I've created. I use TPO. So I kind of have, and I watch order flow a lot in order to keep me in a trade or get me in or get me out of a trade. I think that's extremely important when you're day trading. Um, if you watch the order flow, it kind of just helps you, like I said, get in, get out, or stay in a trade a little bit longer. But the trades that I take, I mean, I pretty much take the same trades over and over. I mean, I just have a system that I use based on levels, volume levels, and order flow.
So could you take me a little bit more through that? Like, what's the ideal sort of setup? What, like, let's say crude oil
So,
here, we're trading at 65.50, and obviously it's the end of the day, but like,
right.
maybe tomorrow morning as an example, let's say we're trading 65.50
So,
here.
what I'm looking for is I'm looking for edges. So, I mean, I'll have resting orders overnight too. So, I'm looking for edges right now. Right now, here I find that there's no edge. Now, you can make, depending on what kind of trader you are, you can make money in this chop. It's just not the kind of trader that I am. So, what I'm looking for is for edges. So, I'm looking for, I'm looking for like volume levels, like when we came down this morning, um, we were, went into a volume level that was very thin. So, chances are it's going to bounce out of it. Right now we're in a thick volume area. So I'm looking for edges, whether it's volume edges or whether it's, high fibs or, or a place in TPO that needs repair, weak spots. So I'm generally, I'm not trading the middle so much. I'm looking for edges. I, I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm explaining it, if I'm explaining it well enough.
No, that makes sense. And look, a lot of people follow you on Twitter, and they see a lot of the different charts you post. And even in our chat room over the past few weeks, you post a lot of different chart patterns and setups. And like you said, the describing of the volume. I've seen a number of different charts where you're looking at highs and lows where there's a significant amount of volume at certain levels, and that kind of gives a signal off of what might be
Right.
coming in the future. And so that makes sense. What about, you mentioned this gets back to the macro side. Oil is so dependent on news, whether it be something, a production spike or decline, OPEC, things like that. How do you get your kind of news throughout the day?
So, I mean, well, I have a squawk. I have you guys. And, I'm constantly, I have a news ticker that's just all oil. So that's what I'm watching all day. And then, I have Twitter, hashtag OTT is the like energy hashtag. So I generally just keep that column open. So I'm looking at a bunch of different stuff, during the day. I have it up. So I'm watching. That's kind of how I get my news every day.
Yeah.
In the mornings, I have an oil news service, so I just read through everything,
And so,
and then I get a ton of reports every day. So that's I get up early and start reading all of those.
yeah, it's definitely important. That's one of the themes just from speaking with all of our traders, just being prepared and, reading a lot and knowing your market. You have a few markets you focus on. How do you think that the market, the way you trade, has changed? Let's call it 5 or 6 years ago versus now. Obviously, you're referencing Twitter and things like that. That's wasn't as important 5 6 years ago. So, how has that changed your trading over the past few years?
I mean, I think that, it's really, I mean, Twitter obviously I think it's very advantageous, although, it can be detracting. So I kind of have to shut Twitter off during the day, except for like my news column. So that's changed. Also, the advent of, algos, there's a lot more algos involved and things like that. So some of the tools that I use have had to evolve so that, I can be able to look at market depth and sort of see algos and patterns and things like that weren't necessarily there before. Sometimes flow gets a lot harder to read because, you have all these splashers and algos going around. So, I think it's sort of just more tools got added to my toolbox to, facilitate the evolution of the market itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about at the current time? Like, what sort of correlations do you look at, if any?
So, I mean, I used to, euro and oil used to be very correlated, but correlations, as you know, work until they don't. So, euro started taking far before crude did, but it was used as a currency hedge, and so that's why the correlation was there. So I still do watch the oil currencies, CAD and NOK and euro. So those are what I'm watching. Obviously, I'm watching heating oil and RBOP as well.
And you think your take is a year, 2 years ago, it was a lot more, there were a lot more trades based off correlations than there are today?
I think so, yeah. I feel like that it is. I feel like a lot of the traditional correlations have sort of broken down a little bit or have changed, which, I think that always happens when, correlations move in and out kind of between different things. I mean, sometimes, ES and crude is going to move hand in hand. Sometimes they move totally opposite. So, I definitely think recently I've seen a lot of the correlation sort of become a myth.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of the traders have been reporting. It's a lot of the markets are constantly changing, and whether it be due to the algos or a number of different reasons, everybody has some suspicions. But
right,
it's always interesting to keep an eye on. So I guess let's take a look at the markets right now. Energy, crude oil is trading about 65.50 in the SEP contract. What are your thoughts on the market right here?
Well, I mean, right now we have, if I generally go, it's OPEC day today. So I generally go and look at options. I want to look at OI. Where's the heaviest OI? I call that max pain. And generally, generally that's kind of where the market tends to end up. And the biggest OI we have right now is 65. So 65 is pretty much pinned because, at 65, that means the calls and the puts kind of, they're both, they both end up at zero. Thanks for playing.
Right.
So, I kind of knew that, and I've been looking, so that's what I look at like during options expiration. So I didn't really think this market was really going to go anywhere today. I mean, it's just chop as I thought that it would.
Yeah, I saw you guys actually mention yesterday, you and Bryn both pointed out that the 65 straddle was trading about 90 cents and 80 cents, and you were looking at selling opportunities there. And I actually misspoke. We're trading actually about 65.30, and those options expire in 40 minutes from now. And like you said, a lot of people are suspecting it's going to be closer to that 65 strike based on the open interest. What about the roll moving, SEP to OP, things like that?
Yeah. So what happens, I mean, during the roll, I know we had that move the other day that we had like that V-shaped move and everybody thought, wow, this is really a bottom. But, I was kind of looking at the pace of roll. So I like to look at the pace of roll, and all these
tools are available at Quick Strike, and at CME Group. Quick Strike, a lot of these tools are free, so you can look them up. They do have a subscription, I think, but so you can look at the pace of roll. And so I look at, how basically the fund pace of roll, which means, well, let me start over. So funds have to be rolled by EOD on OPEC day. They have to be totally rolled. So they have the pace of roll, so we can see, what the funds are doing. So when we start to, people think it's at expiry and we have all these extra days, but really it's not. So, final few days in front of OPEC, you generally see the market get a little bit erratic. And so that's what I'm looking for, because they are rolling before, depending on how much they have to roll. This time we had a lot to roll. We had almost 50% that day. That's a lot, with only 3 days left to go, 2.5 days left to go, to have 50% is, that's a lot of people still to roll. So I expected the market to be quite volatile, and it was.
So is there an opportunity in October or Novi or anything, further down the curve?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you use the tools and like I said, go to Quick Strike or go to CME Group, they have these tools. And then you can be able to see the same thing. And this goes pretty much for, every product that they have, where it doesn't really matter what you trade. From CME, we'll have all these same tools that you can use and see, kind of what the pace of roll is. I don't know what, each individual product, what their rule is about fund roll, but certainly that information could be found out rather easily.
Yeah. So looking at the curve further out than even just this month, is there anything that strikes you or any sort of opportunities longer out on the curve?
I mean, there's not, I don't really see, we had that front month spike. That was a beautiful, the front 2 month spike. That was a beautiful short opportunity to be had. But, I don't see any huge opportunities personally. Sort of in the spreads right now. The Brent WTI spread is kind of interesting to me at this point.
What sticks out to you on the Brent WTI spread?
It's a little bit wide, so kind of looking to see if that comes in a little bit.
Right. And is that a spread that you often trade?
I do at times. If it gets too narrow or too wide, again, I like edges, then I look for opportunities there. Because if it gets too wide, what happens is that WTI becomes much more preferable to buy over Brent. And so at those certain times, then you start to see the spread sort of come in some more.
Yeah. So if a newer oil trader were to come to you and talk to you, what 2 or 3 points do you think are like the most important things to focus on right now in the market?
So, as far as the markets, if you're a technical trader, to be honest, I guess you don't really have to watch the news all the time. However, in order to trade crude oil, I think that you have to be really aware of the news and the news headlines and things when things are coming out, when's the OPEC report coming out, when's this report coming out, because it really does affect intraday price moves, even if it's, doesn't affect it overall. So I would say keep on top of sort of when reports come out, when our inventory days, when, follow news people that, are, from the Middle East and things like that, you want to be watching. As far as on the fundamental side, on the technical side, really, whatever whatever your personal style is, whether you're, swing trader or you're a scalper or,
What
like I'm a medium kind of trader.
Right. So based on that, what is your typical time frame when you put on a trade? What sort of time frame are you looking at?
It really depends on how fast the market's moving, right?
So, I'm looking for more than, I'm looking for a larger portion. So when I'm looking for a trade, I'm, attempting, obviously, to get sort of those, 50-cent moves are larger. Obviously, that doesn't always happen. But those are the types of moves that I'm looking for. So, I could be in a trade 5 minutes, or I could be in a trade all day. It really just depends on the market and how fast or slow the market's moving.
Right. And then do you hold trades sometimes multi-day, or are you out of everything at the end of the day?
No, sometimes I hold it overnight. Yeah, absolutely. If I do swing trade crude sometimes. So, you know, I don't have a problem holding overnight.
I'm just looking back at, I have on the right-hand chart the SEP crude price, and I'm just looking back, and it was about a week or about 2 weeks ago in the chat, or about a week and a half ago, you picked literally the bottom within like 3 cents, and it ripped about 250 higher from that point, and I think you made about $2 on the trade, and you put it perfectly in the chat, and you detailed exactly some of the volume reasons why you got long, some of the technical indicators, and it was really a beautiful illustration, and that was a very good trade that day, and you've had a lot of great trades in the chat, and so it's really interesting to follow your stuff.
Thanks. I can do that more often. It's probably easier for me to go through a trade as I'm doing it rather than say, okay, how do you trade?
Right, and that's one of the things that...
If that makes any sense. I'm probably not, being very clear right now.
No, but, you are, and it's interesting the way that you, like you said, you're very active on social media and in our chat room, and that's great. And you really go through live, why you're doing something, or you do it, and then you kind of mention a few different reasons, and you're updating with trailing stops often. So it's actually really detailed and very easy to follow, which is very important for traders that are whether learning, and a lot of your signals can be applied to other markets as well. You're mainly, like you said, focused on crude and S&P and euro, but a lot of the indicators can be looked at other markets, and so we find it very interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you looked at other markets? I know you mentioned that you basically trade euro, S&P, crude, some other energy products. Have you ever kind of tried to apply your stuff to individual equities?
No, I haven't actually. I've been asked that before, but I actually never have. I would be curious at some point to see my system work with some of the equities. I will try it and get back to you.
Well, maybe just stick to what's working. So.
Well, no, but it would be interesting to put some equities on some of the charts I have. Like, I wonder, how depth chart would look in the equity market if it's, or something like that. If it's how different it is.
Well, we've also heard, and what's your take on this, that some traders, I actually find it really interesting, and it shows a very good discipline that you kind of only focus on 3 or 4 individual things, and so you're not spread too thin. You know everything about crude, like these 3 or 4 markets, you really know all the key signals, you're following them, and so maybe you would have gotten stretched if you start looking at 18 different individual equities, things like that, maybe the focus might be.
Right. I'm one of those traders that I can't trade. I can't trade a bunch of products at once. I can trade 2 or 3 products at a time, and that's about it. 3 is stretching it for me.
So another question I'm hearing is, when does Tracy ever sleep?
What? I power nap. I power nap a lot.
Power naps and Saturdays?
I do. Except and Saturdays, yes.
Right.
So, my sleep schedule is a little bit different, but I do go to bed like super early. So, I'm like in bed at like 8 and up at like.
Well, I don't know if you heard our interview from our trade coach, Rajan. He actually pointed out, and other people have commented it as well, but, it's really important to have a fresh mind. I commented that no traders I know really sleep that much, but, he was talking about it's really important to have a lot of sleep and keep your mind fresh, things like that. And so,
that's true. I believe that is true. So,
yeah.
Yes, I believe that's true. I'll work on that.
Right. All right. Well, like I said, I mean, you give great information in the chat room. You really detail some of your signals that you look at, a lot of your trades, things like that, and so it's really helpful and it's very informative for everybody to follow. So we appreciate that, and also coming on to explain a little bit more about how you trade and how you get those signals. It's really informative. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Look forward to chatting again soon about some different topics in the energy market.
Fantastic.
All right. We'll talk to you later, Tracy.
All right, thanks.